Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Kathleen Kuo, and I am a program manager with Nevada Humanities. And on behalf of our organization, it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So for those of you who don't know who we are, Nevada Humanities is our state's affiliate for the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we try to connect and transform communities by sharing and amplifying the stories, ideas, experiences, and traditions of the diverse people of Nevada. So this creative workshop series is a part of our Nevada Reads programming for 2021. This year, we selected 2 memoirs that encourage us to celebrate and appreciate the natural world and to think more deeply about where we live and our connection and responsibility to the earth. The Creative Workshop series was inspired by the themes and illustrations found in one of those memoirs, World of Wonders, in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments by Amy Nizuka-Matato. If you haven't already read the book, we hope that you're inspired to do so after the workshop ends. It's really lovely. As we engage in conversations about the natural world and the land we inhabit during this year's Nevada Reads programming, one of our goals is to have our readers become better stewards of the earth and to learn more about the land that we live on. As part of this goal, I wanted to acknowledge where I am sitting today in Nevada. We are gathering on the traditional land of the Northern Paiute, the Southern Paiute, the Western Shoshone, and the Washoe people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. So to help you learn more about the land that you might be residing upon, we will be sharing a link in the chat to help you with this. So our workshop leader for today is Kristin Meuser. She has been painting the land for many years throughout California and Nevada. She currently teaches online Zoom workshops on essential landscape elements, including cacti, mushrooms, flowers, waterfalls, journal page design, and more. She moved to Las Vegas in 2018, where her fascination with the desert landscape has flourished in nearby Red Rock Canyon. Her workshops focus on nurturing a deep connection to nature through the ability to see through skill-building exercises, including color mixing, and unique exercises that demystify the art and science of drawing, painting, and writing. You can find her schedule and more information about her workshops on her website at naturemuse.com. So for those of you who have attended our previous workshops, and for those of you who are new today, you'll notice that our workshop is taking the form of a webinar. We have a lot of people in attendance, which is wonderful, but in order to keep this hour-long session focused on Kristin and her work, we're using this format instead of the usual meeting. So that's why you won't be able to see anyone else's faces. But if you do have any questions during the workshop, we ask that you type them in the chat, and if we have time, we will try to answer them at the end. Otherwise, we'll be taking note of the questions that you ask during this session, and we'll ask Kristin and then email you after the workshop with those answers. And finally, as a reminder, the PDF of images that we'll be using during today's workshop can be found on our website. So Kristin, we are so thrilled to have you here today. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. I'm really so happy to be here and connect with people who are connected to the earth and the land. And I just find teaching to be a real lovely experience of community with people who want to deepen their connection to the land. I'm going to begin with a little bio of me. My background is that I have always done art, and I started doing little miniature landscapes on like business size watercolor paper on vacations. And eventually I met John Muir Laws, who many of you may be familiar with, but he's an amazing educator, artist, journaler, and just has created this amazing community online called the Nature Journal Club. I met him about 10 years ago, and he really helped me visualize how I could take my love of doing miniature landscapes, which were a real meditative kind of experience for me, and combining that with words. And so what you'll see on my pages is a combination of the two. And I really think the words and the visuals really create a real memory in your journal. I'm going to start with a poem, or it's not a poem, it's actually an excerpt from a book called Eating Stone, which was written by Ellen Malloy. And it has to do with her feeling about the desert. She spent her whole life in the desert studying, in this case, the bighorn sheep. Sometimes the desert exhilarates me to the point of soaring. Other times I am so heartsick I cannot bear up against the despair, a palpable aching longing for this wild beauty to last and for me never to die and no longer be able to feel, see, hear, taste, and breathe it. A yearning to die before the desert's wild heart is lost, so I do not have to witness it. I think a lot of us feel that way, that we don't want to see it pass away from our lives. So part of what we can do is be good stewards of the land and to enjoy it and treasure it. I'm going to start with this table to help you understand how I see nature journaling in the visual sense. And table has a list of techniques here, and in the foreground, what happens with those techniques, and in the background, the same. So for instance, the detail in the foreground is going to be much more detailed in the foreground and less so in the background. The line quality will be heavier in the foreground and lighter in the background. The contrast in the foreground will be much more hard, light, and dark, whereas in the background, the distance between the lights and darks will be closer together. The same object in the foreground will be larger. In the background, it will become smaller. And if there's a problem sort of understanding which is larger and which is smaller and where it is in the landscape, you can overlap objects so that we always know that the objects in front are the ones that are in the foreground, and what they overlap is in the background. Color temperature is really important. Warmer color in the foreground and cooler color in the background. And color intensity is fairly quite similar. The same color will be the same object will be more brilliant in color and less brilliant in the background due to the atmosphere. So when you're looking in the distance at a range of mountains, they will start to go from perhaps a warm green and then fade to perhaps a blue cast, and then ultimately potentially a purple. So Purple Mountain Majesty is very true in our visual world. So this is one of my journal pages. It's a landscape of that is in Red Rock, and it's actually looking at the Fossil Ridge in the background. And then I took off to First Creek. The flowers in the foreground actually were somewhat in the photo, but or in the view, but I didn't paint them until I came home, and instead I painted the cholla in my backyard. There is a landscape that's very long and narrow. You can see that I use quite a bit of pencil work, and that really helps me not only make the paint an easy way to darken the paint by having this graphite underneath, but it also creates a pattern where I can actually build my mountain side by coloring in these dark shaded areas and then building the mountain around them. So breezy balm in the morning, reprieve from the desert heat, quiet though a single songbird flies, cutting through the stillness, calming my heart. So that brings me back to the feeling I had. And so we can appreciate the visual, but the words really bring some of the feeling to it. Here is another landscape, and this is in near Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite. And it's a complete foreground to sky. So in the foreground, we have more detail in the foliage of this bush. In the background, there's really none. There are trees back here. In the background, they just become shaded areas, but with a vertical line in the pencil work so that you are aware of the fact that those are probably trees. So in this brilliant morning light, the plums and insects, mammals, and rocks live here, the plants, excuse me, and insects, mammals, and rocks live here mostly unnoticed in their splendor, gently loving one another. And here are two little landscapes. So the size of my page is about 5.5 tall by 8.5 wide. So it's a small journal. And so these are really little jewels actually on the page. And when a drawing landscape can be so complex. And so one of the things I do teach in the workshop, in my longer workshops, and I will I'll touch on it today, is how to look at a landscape and simplify it in your mind's eye into shapes of color and shapes of from foreground to background. So you can see in here that we have these warm bushes here. These in the front have a little bit more contrast. They get a little bit more muted in the background. And then back in here, they're just kind of a dull green. And so that gives you the sense that those are far away. And they're also very, very little detail, just kind of a little bit of a scribble of a pencil. And here, this is a very, it really leads you into this crevice in here. And even though the red of the sandstone is a warm color, it still falls to the back because of the overlap and because of some of the idea that there's more pencil work, more darkness here. And then in the back, we have limestone, which is very gray to begin with a little bit of blue over it. And here we have a bush in the front. It always helps to have a plant in the front. It really brings you from the background to the foreground in a real potent way. So we have this warm yucca type plant, and then back in here several bushes and probably small trees. And you can see how much pencil work I've done. Here I'm really showing the direction of the faces of these rocks. These are very squared off rocks, whereas back here, these are very round. And my pencil work shows that. They're really curved strokes. I always like to notice if an insect comes to visit me. These were not a welcome insect, these were mosquitoes, and they were kind of driving me nuts. But so what did I do? I just decided to deal with them and deal with the fact that they were with me. So I kind of drew them and their kind of craziness. This is a scene from in the Sierra Nevadas and in Fraser Falls, which is in the Lakes Basin of the Sierras. And you can see here what happens to trees going back in the distance. So these are rocks here that are in shadow, and then these are in sun. And here's a bush in the sun, and then trees. So this tree is probably the same kind of conifer, but it's got a warmer, it's treated with a warmer color. And this gets a little cooler. And then this in the back, we have the trees, and then they get bluer in the background, and then in the far background, they actually get to be kind of a violet magenta. And sometimes I exaggerate that, but often it's true. It's very true. um, to what I see. And again, here's a bug, a nice little bumblebee, and they don't sting, and they're nice to have around. And I love these fuzzy ladies. Um, let's see, the quiet creek empties over a steep cliff and tumbles zigzagging again, zigzagging down hundreds of feet. Even with the drought, it is spectacular and surprisingly full of power. The rocks along the trail to Fraser Falls, though civilized, is lined with many rock formations. So it's actually a wheelchair friendly trail into this area. This is a landscape of the ocean. It was a 45-minute sketch. I did it with a group of students. And again, you can see how much darkness was achieved with the use of my pencil, and also notice the stroking of the pencil. It's mostly vertical, and so it gives you that sense of being a sheer cliff. If I had done this with horizontal marks, you wouldn't have that same feeling. And then there are little rocks down here, just a little bit of pencil work. Back here we have a few bushes that are kind of a brighter green. As we get back further, they fade a bit. Let's see. Now the wind comes to the edge of the cliff. Birds occasionally crying out in alarm, and across my page, a delicate kiss of a tickle, are the ants. Birds in their shadows gliding across the cliffs, carved surfaces, and now a sparkle to the deep blue depths. And these are four little landscapes. A lot of color in a small space, and I really simplified it and really concentrated on these little, how to create this depth in such a small space. You can see, here what I've done here with the brighter yellow trees in the background. They're cooler. There's a very distant mountain range over here. This is reflection in the water. Periwinkle sky meets furry golden hillside. Birds cawing, water babbling, the sun slowly awakening each rock, grass, and me. This is what I call a landscape slice. And it's when I'm teaching people to color mix, what I do, instead of trying to learn to paint a whole landscape, we create these slices and break them into color areas. So this is the sky. This is the trees. These are the trees in the distance. Here's a hill. Here's some red rocks across the way, along with some gray rocks, and then the water. This is not particularly this scene, but it is a scene. And then once you've written the labels down, then you can start color matching. Skies have many different hues. They can be almost turquoise, and then they can be almost purple. So it's really fun to mix those colors. And here we have trees. You can see all the ways that I was trying to mix that tree color, and the hill too. So it's always important to test colors. All of my pages have these color matching dots, and I use them as kind of a graphic quality, an image painting in and of themselves. And here we have the gray of the rock and the water. So once you learn to mix colors and look at colors and be really pay your attention, you will never see colors the same way again. They do sing. It's really a wonderful exercise. These are students using my kit, and I developed a kit that is very compact, very simplified. It has only four tools, a journal, and a palette filled with 8 colors. And the palette is laid out like this. There is magenta and yellow. All of these yellows are the same color, but this yellow is used to mix with magenta to make your reds and oranges and yellows. This one is to be used, kept pristine, so that you can use it to paint a really clean yellow color. And this yellow is mixed with the cyan to make your grassy emerald greens. Over here, we bring it magenta, we dip into magenta, make a puddle over here, and mix it with either cyan or ultramarine blue to make violets. So this is where all of our jewel colors live, and we always keep these really, really clean. The up above is a purulane green, which is a starting point for conifers, for trees. I mix it with gold to make olive greens. Here we mix our golds and browns with the gold and the burnt umber. And here is a place to mix grays. We start with your shadow violet, which has a bit of a purple cast, and you can add other colors to it to give it the shade that you want. This is a way to, it's a color palette or a color exercise, but it shows all the different colors that you can get by mixing these 8 colors. And there are many, many more. These are the ones always that will be mixed in the lower register of your palette. But up here, there are many, many more combinations. In fact, because there are 8, there's 64 different color combinations. So this is a really robust palette of colors, and they all complement each other in that nothing stands out as not fitting, because they're all made from the same basic stuff. These are some of the what we do in the classes. This is a workshop on hills, mountains, and cliffs, and we usually work in a palette of 4 images in our journal to get hands-on experience with painting the different kinds of rocky formations. This is reflections, and you know, the reflection, what you need to do is look around what's around the water, and then that will tell you where the colors are coming from. So this is in Petaluma, this is up in Yosemite, this is on the Eel River in California, and this is at Mono Lake. Here we have, this was a workshop on the desert landscape. And we have the turtle, the tortoise, the Joshua tree, a cactus flower, and a landscape. And if you attended last week, this is the landscape we did together. Or yeah, the little landscape. So this is your handout. And what I'm going to show you is, pull this over to the side and show you my page of this, and hopefully you were able to break it up, print it out. What I want to show you is that this is the exercise I use to help people start to see, to simplify what they see out in nature. Now, actually, you're simplifying what you see in this photograph, but it can teach you to look for color shapes, for bush shapes, for rock shapes, and how these puzzle pieces fit together. Here is one with many different plant shapes. Here is one with the Joshua tree, and these little white marks are the gel pen outlining the shapes. This is another landscape similar to this one, but different. different colors, different bush shapes. And then there's this, which is a very interesting piece because there's this really, you really have to think about how to separate these mountains into shapes that overlap to create depth. And then last but not least is this one. This is up at the top of let's see, it's not Fossil Ridge, but it's in Nevada. And so we're looking out at a very distant limestone and sandstone mountain, and then the horizontal plain of the valley. So this is the one we're going to be working with. So I'm going to take my this handout without the marks on it, and take my gel pen and start to figure out how to simplify this. So I'm pretty much going to go from the foreground to the background. If you have a gel pen, it's important to note that the gel pen, if you work with it simply, or excuse me, lightly, it's the happiest. If you press too hard, it's not very happy and it won't do what you want it to do. So, I'm creating a few different shapes here. When you're working with a photograph, it's really hard to see things as easily as it is when you're in nature. I pretty much exclusively work outside, except for when I'm teaching, because I like to look around the corners and to say, is that really behind or in front of, or, trying to figure out how this puzzle piece fits together. And then I'm going to put the lines of the valley, and then work in some shapes for the mountains behind. It's important to think about the shape of the sky. So when you're painting or drawing something, it's always better, if you can, to paint the not the shape. So if you're doing the mountain edge, do the sky edge. We often get hung up on the shape of the things we're actually painting and lose sight of these beautiful angles that they create against other objects. So that can really help you get individuality to your paintings and drawings. So once I do this with students, I'm going to create a horizontal box. Actually, this is a vertical box, but for you, I'm going to make it horizontal so that you can see it a little better. And I'll show you how I, let's see, I'm going to move my slideshow over just a bit more. And let's see how let's see, I can, there we go. Okay. I'm going to give you an idea of how I'm going to transfer those lines into my journal. So I take my blue pencil. You may have wondered what's up with the blue pencil. It's a way to get your first strokes down without worrying about them being so perfect. So I'm going to basically transfer these lines onto my horizontal frame. And I'm going to make this is a very horizontal kind of line here. So I'm figuring out where on the page that is. And then above it is going to be my far away, the baseline of, well, it's going to be my mountain edge. And then these are going to be my rocks. And I'm just going to be pretty simple about them. I'm trying to figure out where to put them, how they fit onto this page. Can everyone hear me okay? Kathleen, am I doing okay?
Yes, we can hear you great. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. So you can see I've already simplified it on my paper. Now, if I were outdoors, I would have been thinking about that and then, thinking about the shapes and then going directly to my blue pencil. And also I can, correct myself. So that's one of the benefits of using this blue pencil is I don't have to worry about it being perfect the first time around. So this may feel like it's a little bit of it's not a real exciting rock or, scene, but it does give a feel for what's really out there, what some of these rock formations really look like. The texture is so crazy, and if you try to sit on it, it'll just sort of bite you. So it's just very interesting. Now my proportions are a little off here, right? But I'm not going to worry about it too much. That's part of what we get to do is once we walk away, even when I walk away from this photo, I won't remember. I won't remember exactly where everything fell. Okay, sorry. So at this point, I'm going to go back in with my sorry. I'm going to go back in with my I'm going to go back in with my graphite and kind of refine it. I don't know if you can't see that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the actual photograph here and move it a little closer so you can see it nice and big. And let's see how that goes. That's pretty good. Okay. Actually, it's just a little bit too big. Let me do something. All righty. Okay, well, this will get you most of what's in there. We're missing a little bit on the right. I'm going to start with the sky. I find that if the sky is a great place to begin to kind of set the tone for your artwork. So I'm looking, down below here, I'm gonna start matching colors. That looks pretty good to me. It's got a kind of a turquoise cast to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just go straight in with it. I use the side of my brush and carefully outline these shapes. Now, as I go down, more and more water is by gravity is coming back down into my brush. This is a water brush, so it already has water in it, in the bladder. And so gravity brings down the water into the brush and onto the paper. I'm going to start with that. It's a little light, and later I may change that. But for now, I think it's fine. So now when I look at these mountains in the background and I really look at them, I feel like they're a nice violet. So I'm going to mix up violet on my palette, which is a combination of my magenta and my cyan, or my ultramarine, and they're very similar. I'm going to work on the areas that are the most violet. And then come back in with a lighter version of that. And the way I do that is I don't add water to my palette, I actually just wick off pigment to make a lighter color, and I test it. And then I'll pop that into the lighter areas. Now I may change those to a little bit more of a peach color, which I happen to have on my palette from mixing before. And so I can go in and put a little bit of that in some area. The one thing I didn't really do is sidetrack there, work with my pencil. And I'll be showing you how nice it is to have these pencil shapes. And as you're going along, you can add other shapes, which here we have these nice bushes. And I just kind of rough them in. I find that it's best to use sort of straight lines rather than too many curvy lines when I'm working with those. And I even frame it with graphite. So you can see I'm refining the edges, some of the texture. I couldn't do this at a first pass. I need this structure underneath, made with my blue pencil, that allows me to work off of it. Now with all of this texture, so it doesn't just look like a surface pattern, flat pattern. I'm only going to use the indicate the texture in certain areas where it's the darkest. And then we have over here, we have an actual area. I'm going to delineate that with my blue pencil, an area that's a little darker. And I want to make sure that I capture that. And this has a light spot just peeking over. Let's see if I can put that up for us. There we go. And a very dark area in here. So I'm going to make sure I capture that. So I'm going to find my areas that need, that are around the edges of things where we see a lot of texture. Often the edge that is turning from light to dark is where you're going to see a lot of texture. But try not to polka dot the whole thing. Actually, another bush up here. So bushes always have to be rooted, held to the ground, because they do create a shadow underneath themselves, and that creates the sense that they're actually sitting in the ground. I use the strokes to try to emulate the kind of energy that each plant has. So these are very sort of grassy bushes, as are the So as you can see, I use a lot of pencil work. I enjoy it. I love how it looks. And it also just gives form to what I'm doing. So now I'm going to do some color matching on these rocks. And this rock in back here in the background, let's move that over. Is kind of, into my eye, brown, more of a warm brown, which is going to be a little tricky because it's going to make us think that it might be coming forward, but actually it's just the color of the rock. So I'm mixing up some brown straight from my palette, testing it, and feeling pretty good about it as a background for this area. So I'm going to pop this in here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shadow violet to that, test it, and then add that right along the edge. Now I may end up adjusting these colors, but for the time being, I think this will work for me. I can always use the edge of my finger to to change it. Now it looks really different to me in the on the screen, so I'm not sure what you're seeing. I'm going to darken it a little bit, and I'm definitely going to darken this area. But it is more. It's a pretty nice. It's got some nice color to it. So I'm actually adding some magenta to that, adding more brown, and testing that. And I'm going to go back in with that. And then I'm going to wick off quite a bit of that pigment and then try to blend it a little bit, even though it's not quite dry nor is it really wet. So it's a tricky thing with this paper. I'm actually fine with that. But sometimes if you wait till things are, you either blend colors when they're all wet, all the colors are wet, or you wait till they dry. And it's kind of hard to do it when they're not neither here nor there, because you can start picking up the surface of the paper. So I'm going to go straight in here and try and get this nice dark shaded area. And for big areas, it's a good idea to use the side of your brush. These brushes are great. You can go, you can get fine detailed work with the tip, and some nice washy brush strokes with the side. So these kinds of this subject in particular, you really have to pay attention to the value, the darkness and the lightness of the colors that you mix. And you can see how I keep testing them a lot. I notice now that I have made an error with my shapes. So I'm going to adjust that so that I can put this nice dark area in here. So it's always fine to rework your drawing. This is a gray that's just kind of sitting on my brush, and I'm going to go in and do a little bit more shadow violet down in here, a little more, and make it even darker. That's it. And now's the time to look around and see if there's anywhere else on my painting where this color will be appropriate, and goes work on that area. And my feeling is that this area is a good candidate. And down into this sky as well. Now here we have some lighter areas, so I want to leave some. It's always nice if you can to leave a little bit of white space, so that you can see kind of the sparkle of the sun catching the texture. Haven't really done too much of that. Maybe I can do more of it over here. So this is just a little warmer brown, and so I'm going to add a little umber to my shadow violet, and go pretty light with it and see if I can leave some white area. And then I'm going to work on this little shadow in here, make it darker beneath these shrubs. And then work on the color. So this is actually, I want to go back to the mountains here. And now that it's nice and dry and a little bit more dramatic, And then there's the surface area is kind of a mauve that when we come down into the valley, that works for me pretty well. I'll pop that in. I think it's okay. And then there's a little darker band, which probably is just a little bit of violet. I'm mixing with the cyan and the magenta. It's I need more, actually more of the ultramarine blue. The ultramarine blue is a little grayer, makes a little bit of a grayer violet that you can't get with the cyan. So that's a little too strong. I'm going to try and pull some of that out, actually lighten it. Maybe that'll work. Okay, let that be, not flavor it too much. Add a little bit more. I want to add, sorry, my voice. Want to add a little bit more cliffy kind of strokes here, because they are these wonderful mountains in the background. Okay, so now we're left with really the bushes. And so these are nice and kind of, a good candidate for these would be the curly green. So I'm going to test it. It needs a little bit of cyan and a little bit of yellow, I believe. And I'm mixing those up all up with I have a video on my website on color mixing. So feel free to take a look at that. That'll help you understand what it is I'm doing here. So this looks like a pretty good match. And I'm gonna, like I was trying to do with my mountains or with my rocks, I'm gonna try and leave some white areas to give a little sense of sparkle and sunlight. And then in the background, there's like a sage green, and then in front of that, I have it kind of reversed in how I drew it, but I do want to get some of that lighter color in there. And I'm going to make that lighter, grassier color with the gold. And it's kind of a dirty gold. It's not clean gold. It's had some umber in there, but it's looking pretty good. That's why I leave as many colors as I can on my palette so that I can just dip into them. And once I'm into them, once I am done, I don't have to clean because I may use that later and with very little modification. So the reason I'm just using so few colors is so that you learn, my students learn how to mix colors, because no matter, even if you go to the store and you have 100 different colors, more than often they won't be the right ones and you still have to modify them anyway. And we'll finish off here with a little bit of the light sagey color in there. Now I see that this has gotten light because it's dried. And so I'm going to go back in with my burnt umber and a little bit of magenta. It's up here, test it, and even add a little violet to it to darken it up. And get some strokes in here. Get some strokes in this area. It's not quite dry, but it's okay for our purposes today. So I can leave a few minutes for some questions, answering some questions if you want to do that. Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind, monitoring the chat a little bit, I'm happy to field some questions or to answer any that may have already come up.
Sure. We only had a quick question at the beginning in which someone asked, what size paper would you recommend? And you did touch on this later, but in general, do you have a general paper recommendation or size for?
Well, yeah. Well, my journal is 8.5 by 11, and these images here are all done on a horizontal page. My journals are bound on the short side, and so they're made for landscapes. Even though I've turned it this way for you today. So that's what, yeah, because that I can put into my purse with my other, with my journal, my palette, and my 4 tools, and I'm set to go in a very small area. So that's what I suggest.
Is it a watercolor paper that you're using?
It's not watercolor paper. It's a nice, it's fairly strong, and it takes watercolor. I don't use watercolor for my own journaling, but also for teaching, because I really want people to see their journals as a practice, as a place to experiment, not to put too much emphasis on creating a finished product. So, and also this paper, because it doesn't take too much water without it started killing, it dries quickly. So you can move along during a whole day and have several pages, and they won't be all, they won't have blotted against one another. I also only work on the right-hand side. I'm right-handed, so that if you do a full spread of an open book and paint on both sides, and they aren't completely dry, when you fold it up and put it away, you may find that they've glued together, and there's no way you can get them apart without ripping everything out. So those are kind of the rules. I work with really simple materials. I don't experiment a lot, because there's so much just to be found in these materials, which with the kit is available on my website, by the way. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Kristin. We just have 2 more quick questions.
Okay.
One person asked, she writes, the black lines are very dark. Is that just with the regular pencil? She says that she might have missed it since she was trying.
Oh, yeah, they are, it's just the way the camera's picking it up. No, they are, let's see if I can, they are, yeah, maybe that's more accurate. They're, it's a HB and a 0.7. So I don't use black, because generally there is no black in nature. So I'm trying not to make it too much into an illustration, but trying to match what I see. People do, and then they do lovely work with it. So it's like, I'm not saying don't do it, but yeah, this is all just graphite.
Okay, and then our last question for you today. What do you take with you when you're in the field, just to pack your colors and your notebook and your brushes? Like, how do you sort of take it all with you when you're out?
Sometimes, well, I have 2 pouches. They're like messenger bags. And so you can put the flap toward you and leave it open. And so you can basically reach inside and feel for your 4, only your 4 tools. And that's all I ever do. So I have my journal, my palette, and my 4 tools, and I put in my messenger bag in different little pouches, so I can just reach in and feel for them. And then I also, depending on if I know what the landscape is going to be like, I have a 3-legged stool that I bought at REI. You can buy them various places. They're totally lightweight. Or I cut up a piece of foam if I know I'm going to be on a rocks like we painted tonight. And you can just sit on the foam. So very lightweight. And my close focus binoculars for sure. One thing about painting colors is that just like you can't really see detail unless you get up really close, you can't see colors either. So close focus binoculars are give you the ability to see. You can get as close as 18 inches from your subject, which is really close. It's almost like looking at them with a microscope. And so you can see all the variety of colors in a surface. All of, leaves have so many different shades of green on them. As just the cliffs in the distance and all, but the closer you get, the more colors you see. So I really recommend those as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kristin, for this workshop today. I've definitely picked up a lot of new tips and tricks that I will take with me in the future. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope that you learned something from Kristin's workshop as well. Again, you can find more about Kristin on her website at naturemuse.com. We will send you a link to that and a follow-up email as well with our survey. Oh, it looks like you're going to pull that up. Thank you. And then just as a reminder, our next workshops in our creative workshop series will be led by Jeff and Maria Fulmer. So the first one is actually next Wednesday, October 6th, and then the following Sunday, October 10th. And you can find more information about that on our website, nevadahumanities.org. So we hope to see you there. And thank you again. Thank you. And we'll hope to see you at all future events. Take care.
Thank you all.